The stage lights dim, and in the quiet that follows, a single spotlight lands on a man in black. Clint Black, once the voice that carried the heart of Nashville, now stands as a ghost of his own songs. For decades, he sang about love, loyalty, and truth. But behind that calm, smiling cowboy was a man silently breaking apart. Few knew of the endless nights he spent caring for his ailing father while battling his own fading health. Few saw the loneliness that fame brought, a kind of silence louder than applause. And though he shared his stage with legends like George Strait and Randy Travis, Clint carried a burden none of them could see. At 63, that burden has finally caught up with him. Years of touring, of burying pain under melody, have left scars no award could heal. The man who once saved country music from commercial chaos is now facing his most painful truth yet, that even legends can disappear in plain sight. They called him the quiet cowboy, but the truth behind that silence is much darker than anyone ever knew. Clint Black was born in 1962 in Long Branch, New Jersey, but his real story began in the dusty backroads of Katy, Texas, where dreams were small and survival came first. The youngest of 4 boys, Clint grew up in a modest house built by his father, G.A. Black, a hard-working pipeline worker who carried both strength and sorrow in equal measure. Music wasn't a luxury, it was a refuge. Clint's earliest memories were filled with the hum of his father's guitar and the laughter of his brothers as they sang old country tunes around the kitchen table. But behind the family's warmth lay quiet hardship, long nights without enough money, his father's health failing, and the constant weight of proving himself. At just 14, Clint began writing his own songs, using his lyrics to escape a world that often felt too heavy. By his late teens, he was already playing in small bars across Texas, his voice carrying the kind of ache that only comes from growing up fast. He was gentle, disciplined, and different. A boy who didn't crave noise or fame, only the truth in melody. Those early years shaped everything. Watching his father push through pain, Clint learned resilience. Watching his mother hold the family together, he learned tenderness. And through every chord, he began building the quiet soul that would one day make him a legend. He didn't know it then, but the boy strumming a beat-up guitar on Texas nights was writing not just songs, he was writing the story of his own survival. By the mid-1980s, Clint Black was a name whispered in the smoky corners of Texas honky-tonks. His voice, clean, warm, and honest, cut through the noise of neon bars like a prayer in a storm. Every night, he played for small crowds that didn't yet realize they were watching the future of country music. In 1989, that future arrived. His debut album, Killin' Time, didn't just climb the charts, it changed the sound of Nashville. While others chased pop trends, Clint brought country back home. His lyrics were simple but profound, his melodies pure and timeless. Songs like A Better Man and Nobody's Home spoke of heartbreak with a kind of quiet dignity that felt rare in an era of excess. Suddenly, the quiet cowboy became a national name. Awards flooded in, and his face appeared everywhere, from Billboard to The Tonight Show. Yet even as the spotlight grew brighter, Clint remained grounded. He still traveled by bus, still tuned his own guitar, still called home to check on his family in Texas. Behind that humility, though, there was a silent fear. The fear of losing what made his music real. Nashville's music machine wanted him to change, to sound bigger, more commercial. But Clint fought back, writing his own songs,
producing his own records and refusing to let his soul be rewritten for profit. For a time, he was unstoppable, the symbol of a country revival, a man who carried the legacy of George Strait and Randy Travis into a new golden age. But the higher he climbed, the more fragile the ground beneath him became.
Fame came fast, but so did the shadows that followed it. Behind the polished cowboy hat and easy smile, Clint Black was quietly fighting battles few ever saw. The very industry that once praised him for being pure country began to demand compromise. Record executives pushed him toward radio-friendly formulas, stripping away the raw honesty that had defined his sound. For a man of principle, that was slow torture. Clint resisted. He wrote his own songs, co-produced his albums, and turned down projects that didn't align with his vision. But rebellion came with a cost. By the late 1990s, radio began to turn its back on him. Sales dipped. Critics whispered that he was out of touch. Yet Clint wasn't chasing charts. He was chasing truth, even if it meant losing everything he had built. Then came the personal blows. His father, the man who had taught him music and grit, was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Clint spent months at his bedside, caring for him until the very end. When his father passed, something in Clint broke. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in quiet exhaustion. He stopped writing for a while, stopped performing. For a man who had built his world on words and melodies, silence became both refuge and prison. And though he never descended into scandal or addiction, his isolation was its own kind of suffering. Fans wondered why his name had vanished from headlines, but Clint wasn't lost. He was retreating, trying to find himself again in a world that had forgotten how to listen. His health, too, began to falter. Years of touring and stress wore him down, and whispers of chronic illness began circulating among close friends. He rarely confirmed anything, only smiling softly when asked. It was the smile of a man who'd learned that not all pain needs to be spoken, and that sometimes silence is the loudest cry for help. When the world stopped listening, one person never did: Lisa Hartman. She had been beside Clint since the height of his fame, long before the shadows grew long. Together, they built a quiet life away from Nashville's noise, raising their daughter, Lily, and finding peace in what truly mattered. Yet even love could not shield Clint from the storms inside him. After his father's death, Clint's songs changed. The melodies became slower, more fragile. In 1999, he and Lisa recorded When I Said I Do, a duet that felt less like a song and more like a confession. The lyrics, about loyalty, pain, and promise, carried the weight of every sleepless night, every moment he had almost given up. The track became a timeless hit, but behind its beauty was a man confronting the deepest grief of his life. As the 2000s unfolded, Clint's visibility faded further. He performed less, often citing health and family, but those close to him knew the truth. The loss of his father and the pressure of living up to his own legend had hollowed something inside him. Friends said he spent long stretches alone at his ranch, writing songs he never released, songs about regret, aging, and the fear of being forgotten. Then came his own health decline. Though Clint rarely spoke publicly about it, whispers of chronic pain and respiratory issues spread quietly through the Nashville circle. When he did appear, fans noticed he looked thinner, slower, yet still carried that same gentle grace. Every performance became an act of endurance, a man holding on, not for fame, but for love and meaning. By 63, Clint Black had stopped chasing the world. The lights, the crowds, the applause, they all faded into memory. What remained was his truth, a legacy written not in gold records, but in scars, silence, and songs that outlived the pain.
Today, when fans look back at Clint Black's life, they don't just remember the man in the black hat. They remember the silence between his notes. He wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but he was the most honest. In a world where fame often devours truth, Clint stood for something purer: integrity, loyalty, and love. You can hear it in every line he ever sang, from A Better Man to When I Said I Do. Those songs were never about chart positions or awards. They were about a man trying to make sense of loss, time, and grace. He once said in an interview, "I write to remind myself that life is still beautiful, even when it hurts." That quote became a mirror of his entire journey. His peers, George Strait, Alan Jackson, Vince Gill, have all spoken of Clint with quiet reverence. They call him the conscience of country music, a man who kept its soul intact when the industry tried to sell it away. Younger artists still cite him as proof that you don't need noise to make people listen, just truth. At 63, Clint Black remains a living testament to endurance. His story is not one of tragedy alone, but of grace within pain. A reminder that some voices may fade from the radio, but never from the heart of those who truly listened. Maybe that's the real legacy of Clint Black. Not the hits, not the fame, but the silence. That sacred pause after the last note, where you finally understand everything he was trying to say.